What is going on, guys? Jacob here, Miami Dolphins Syndicate. Happy Victory Monday. These are the 5 things we learned in the win over the Jacksonville Jaguars. So those of you that are returning from last year, you know how we do things with the 5 things learned. If you are new, before we get into this, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below. We got a lot of new viewers coming in. The subscribe to not subscribe ratio is not too great. So if you are new, please hit that subscription button. But the way we do things on these 5 things learned videos, with wins, we'd like to take a look at the negatives of the game first, and then if we lose, we'd like to look at some of the positives before we get into the negatives. So with that, we will get into a couple negatives here to start off the video, and the first one being same old issues with the Miami Dolphins. And with that, I mean there were some issues that I saw yesterday that we saw the last couple seasons with Mike McDaniel in this Miami Dolphins team. And the 2 most notable ones that I saw being an issue were the penalties racking up, as well as not being able to get plays off, having to call timeouts because you couldn't get the play called in time. 9 penalties, 103 yards, some penalties on offense that took away some decent plays, some penalties on defense. Just the Miami Dolphins' lack of discipline, lack of ability to just play straight up, not get any penalties, has been an issue over the last couple of years, and discipline is also something that comes into question when you look at being able to get plays off. So many times, the Miami Dolphins are breaking the huddle with 10 seconds or less on the play clock. That is not feasible. You cannot do that in a 17-game season time and time again, and we saw that with all 3, if I'm not mistaken, all 3 of the timeouts in the first half having to be called because the team couldn't get the snap off in time. Another penalty in the second half, or there was a penalty in the second half when the team broke the huddle 8 seconds, and then there's a holding play because everyone's getting up to the line as quick as possible, and then you snap the play immediately, and somebody busts through on the defensive line, and it took away, I believe it was a decent gain by Achane. Another timeout having to be called in the second half because, again, not being able to get the play call off. I don't know if it's a Tua issue. I don't know if it's a Mike McDaniel issue. I don't know what it is, but the penalties being racked up, the inability to get plays off in time is certainly an issue for the Miami Dolphins. Number 2, one more negative before we get into the positives. This is something that we knew was going to be an issue, something we talked about all offseason long, something we saw coming during the summer in the Miami Dolphins' inability to run the ball. Jeff Wilson was the leading rusher on the day for the Miami Dolphins. 26 yards, 82 total yards on 25 attempts, 3.2 yards per carry. You do have 1 rushing touchdown where Achane got in. Interestingly, a little side note, Achane being the goal line back, not something that I saw coming, especially with Wilson, Mostert, and then also how we saw Alec Ingold even get involved more in the rushing game. Did not see that coming, but Miami Dolphins, 81 yards, your leading rusher, 26 yards on the day. And this was something we always expected to happen when you lose your 2 best rushing blocking offensive linemen. Connor Williams goes up to Seattle. Robert Hunt gets a big contract going over to the Carolina Panthers. So that interior of the offensive line was absolutely gutted this last offseason, and clearly it has not been improved to a liking that the Miami Dolphins consistently run the ball up the middle. This team did have more of a outside run mentality last year, but we saw as the season went on that is not something you can live by. You need to be able to run the ball up the middle. Look at that overtime game last night between the Rams and the Lions. Every play in overtime was a run up the middle by David Montgomery, which took the Lions all the way down the field, scored. Rams didn't even get the ball. The Lions have the ability to run the ball up the middle with David Montgomery, can even do so with Jahmyr Gibbs, but they also have one of the best offensive lines in football. Miami Dolphins clearly do not have the case. I feel good about our tackles. The interior of the offensive line is a mess. Aaron Brewer, I think he did all right. The guard situation is going to be rough all season long. The teams are going to be able to attack the Dolphins from within the interior of the offensive line, which is obviously going to disrupt the rushing attack, and it's even going to be able to disrupt the passing attack, especially with Tua, somebody who's a little bit undersized, only 6 foot. If you're able to get those mammoths of men, 6'4", 6'5", 6'6", 300 pounds, going directly into his line of vision, that is going to interrupt the timing offense that this passing offense likes to utilize. I am concerned about the interior offensive line. I am concerned about the Miami Dolphins' struggles to run the ball. Okay, now that we got that out of the way, you see that? We took the negatives. They're over there now. All right? They're gone. Out of sight, out of mind. Positives. Miami Dolphins 1-0 in the season, and a lot of which was because we were able to win in the clutch. So many narratives about the Miami Dolphins over the last couple of years, so many negative narratives to talk about this team, inability to beat good teams, inability to win when the games come down into the clutch moments of the game. That's when you're looking at scores, one score less, 6 minutes less in the game, you're winning by a touchdown or losing by a touchdown, your ability to keep a lead or go get a lead back. And the Miami Dolphins did that very well yesterday over the Jaguars. Fourth quarter comeback, did not allow a single point in the second half, coming back to win that with a game-winning kick in overtime against a team that last year had a winning record. Obviously, new season, but that is something that was talked about ad nauseum last year, how the Miami Dolphins struggled to beat teams with a winning record. And that was very much true. Only team with a winning record, if I'm not mistaken, that we did beat was the Dallas Cowboys, and Dallas Cowboys had their own issues of beating good teams on the road. Something had to give there. Last year, Jacksonville Jaguars 9-8, back-to-back 9-8 seasons. Matter of fact, for the Jacksonville Jaguars, able to come back and win that game. Really, if that really one play changing the tide of the game, that ETN fumble, Tyreek Hill next play able to take it for a touchdown. If that doesn't happen, Dolphins probably don't win the game, but is a matter of inches in football. One play can turn the tide either way, and the Miami Dolphins didn't give up. They were resilient. They had so many reasons that you could have given them an excuse to lose that game yesterday. First game of the season, discombobulated, definitely said that word incorrectly. We forget about it. We move on. Beyond that, Tyreek Hill incident. Obviously, that's going to send a little bit of shock waves through the locker room, and the team can respond in one of two ways. You can come back, support your teammate, or you can fold under pressure. Also, obviously, massive injury issues. We broke that down in a video for you guys last week. Injuries, even though pretty much everybody who was on that list was expected to play other than Malik Washington, even though all of them did play, you're still going to the season not at 100%. You haven't been able to go to the training camp at 100%. You haven't been getting the reps. So, week one, Tyreek Hill, injuries, so many reasons for that game to have gone the way of the Jaguars, and initially it did, but the Dolphins fought back, winning it in a fashion that we have not seen a lot with Tua and Mike McDaniel. Number 4, and something that was at one point a loser for me when I was doing my winners and losers videos in the preseason games, one of which might have even been 2 weeks where I had this as a loser, and it was a special teams masterclass yesterday by the Dolphins. I was the biggest Jake Bailey hater after watching him in person against the Commanders and watch his noodle of a leg punt the ball 40 yards, had no ability to flip field position, no ability to give the Miami Dolphins an advantage in special teams. And also we saw Jason Sanders miss a couple kicks in preseason. We saw him miss a kick yesterday, and at that point I was certainly worried because we had a year or so where Jason Sanders was one of the best kickers in the NFL. Before that, a lot of Dolphins fans have forgotten about how Jason Sanders was on the verge of being cut probably from this Dolphins team. And then he gets the team into the playoffs, kicking, I think, 3 field goals that last game of the season against the Jets, getting us into the playoffs before we were beat by the Bills the next week. But he got us into the playoffs, and since that moment, Jason Sanders has been an excellent kicker for the Miami Dolphins. Yesterday, misses that initial kick. I looked at the replay, looked like a little bit of a bad hold, looked like it was a little bit off the angle that would have led him to slice it or cut it back his direction, whatever the correct golf terminology with that is. Comes back, hits a game-tying kick, game-winning kick, and then, again, Jake Bailey. I was somebody who I was very displeased that Jake Bailey was still the Miami Dolphins punter. I thought he had no ability to flip field position, did not have a boot in him, and quite the opposite yesterday, flipping the field multiple occasions, pinning the Jaguars back within their own 10-yard line multiple occasions, did everything he was asked to do, did everything I thought he couldn't do. So Sanders, you miss that first one, you can miss every field goal, every extra point throughout the game. But if the game is on the line, you're asked to nail the game-winning kick, and you hit it, fine with me. Again, Jake Bailey last year didn't look good. Preseason didn't look good, and was one of the biggest players yesterday that led the Miami Dolphins to be able to win the game. And number 5, and this one I think is the most obvious, might even have an honorable mention after this, and that is this team is the Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, and Devon Achane show. Obviously, Tua is the spearhead. I'm just kind of making that as an assumption. Duh. Tua is the one that is the point guard. He leads the way. But when you look at this offense, everything, and I mean everything, is going to have to run through Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, or Devon Achane. I say have to or get to, whatever your terminology is, whatever you see, glass half full, glass half empty. Raheem Mostert looked poor. The ability just to run the ball up the middle was poor in general, and Raheem Mostert is not a guy that is going to be able to really, he has speed, but he has straight line speed. He's not really trying to look to get a catch in the flat and make him play with it. That's definitely more Devon Achane, where giving him a wide receiver screen, and Devon Achane could easily take it 12 to 15 yards, where Raheem Mostert, you're not making that side-to-side movement as well. The passing game, you look beyond Tyreek and Waddle, it was Devon Achane, and then Raheem Mostert at 10 yards. Raheem Mostert was our fourth leading receiver at 10 yards. The guys above him, Tyreek at 130, Jalen Waddle at 109, and Devon Achane at 76. This offense is entirely dependent on those guys playing well, playing to their best abilities, but also just staying healthy, which was something at multiple times last year. All three of those guys had their own injury issues. We need them healthy. We need them playing like they did yesterday. That is how the Miami Dolphins are going to be able to win games. That's how the Miami Dolphins are going to be able to come back in games. That's how the Miami Dolphins are going to be able to beat a good Jacksonville Jaguars team like we saw yesterday. And like I said, I got an honorable mention here. Usually we stick it to just 5, but I got to give 6. And I got to give a shout out to Anthony Weaver in the Miami Dolphins defense, pitching a shutout in the second half, a complete 180 from what we saw in the first half, where the Jacksonville Jaguars were really able to get, not necessarily everything they wanted, but I mentioned yesterday in my reaction video that the Jacksonville Jaguars, within their scripted plays, which usually you come to the game, you have anywhere between 10 to 15 or so scripted plays where within reason, each given play what you're going to run. Assuming the play before it worked, what's coming next and what's coming next and what's coming next. And I'm sure you have some deviations within that where, okay, we have the ball 3rd and long now, a little bit of situational play calling. We can't do what we thought we were going to do, so we're going to change it up a little bit. But within their scripted plays, the Jaguars looked really good. In that first half, put up 17 points, and they ran the ball well. Tank Bigsby, Travis Etienne, obviously didn't get the best of games out of Christian Kirk, but Brian Thomas, the rookie, looks good. Gabe Davis was getting open occasionally, and Trevor Lawrence looked comfortable in the pocket. And then complete 180 again in the second half, where Trevor Lawrence no longer looks comfortable in the pocket. We got the turnover on the strip from Travis Etienne, where Javon Holland was able to peanut punch it out of there. Jalen Phillips getting a sack at the end of the game. Calais Campbell starting off the game with a sack. I loved how this defense looked. So many moving parts, so many new guys. Calais Campbell, Jordan Poyer, Jalen Ramsey coming to the game beat up. Obviously, new defensive coordinator. So much reasons for why this defense shouldn't have looked good. So much reasons why the offense could have struggled. And both sides, I saw a ugly game. It certainly wasn't pretty. It certainly wasn't the best Miami Dolphins performance you're going to see of the season. But we didn't get to see the Dolphins win like this last year. We didn't really get to see many occasions where the Dolphins were in a gritty, tougher environment. It was at home, but just the way the game was playing wasn't pretty. It wasn't the style of the game that Miami Dolphins want to play with. We weren't necessarily controlling the pace for the majority of the game. However, the second half, defense stepped up, special teams stepped up, big plays by the offense led us to victory, and I'm somewhat confident going into this Thursday night game. Obviously, the Buffalo Bills have our number. Swept us last year, beat us in the playoffs 2 years ago. Very difficult game. Last game of last season. Opportunity to win the division, get a home playoff game the first time in God knows how many years. You don't do that, and obviously losing the first round. Bills were the team that did that to us. They made it to the second round. They've been the powerhouse of the AFC East recently. Now, it again wasn't pretty, but because of that, I think that gives me a little bit more confidence than I normally would have going to this Thursday night game. Let me know your thoughts on the game that happened yesterday. Let me know down below in the comments. What are your thoughts on Tua? What are your thoughts on the offense? What are your thoughts on the offensive line? Mike McDaniel, the defense, the new players. What do you think of that game? What are your thoughts going into Buffalo? Let us know down below in the comments. You know what to do. Hit the like button, please. Hit the subscribe button. Come on, guys. We're into the season now. Got a good growing here on the channel. Appreciate y'all for tuning in, showing up, showing out. Appreciate y'all very much. Do all that, please, pretty please, and have a great rest of your day. Go Dolphins.